We are a little more than 2 weeks out from the start of the 2026 legislative session, and there will be a heavy push to fix Oklahoma's schools. That's in addition to some changes to the state budget required by President Trump's big, beautiful bill. Joining me on the program to speak unedited is Speaker of the Oklahoma House Kyle Hilbert about the work to be done in the months ahead. Back on the program to speak unedited is Speaker of the House Kyle Hilbert. Thanks for coming back. I appreciate it.
Great to be back.
We're 2 weeks out from session. I'm wondering, it sounds like obviously you got to do the budget. Sounds like an appetite for education reform, but I want to know, what are your top three?
Well, you hit one of them already, and that's early childhood literacy. You know, when you look at where we stand as a state, I feel like for far too long, we as Oklahomans have just accepted Oklahoma's rankings near the bottom of the pack for the country. And one of the things that's fascinating is, as a member of the state legislature going into my 10th year, I've had the privilege of going around the country and getting to visit with some of my colleagues who are state legislators in other states. And year after year at different conferences, we would be told that we were 49th in our respective states, which I always found fascinating. We were all 49th. But so I started to ask some individuals from other states, well, who's 50th? And almost without question, everybody would say, thank God for Mississippi. Mississippi is the 50th state in education. Well, what's happened over the past decade is that trend has shifted, and now we're saying thank God for Mississippi, but for a different reason. But it's because they've proven a strategy of investing in early childhood literacy, as well as being partnered with accountability to have a really incredible turnaround that folks are calling the Mississippi Miracle, where they've went from generationally being at the bottom of education rankings to now being closer to the top. So
we've heard a lot about the Oklahoma Competes plan. Mm-hmm. Is that the plan you all are going with, or some elements from it? I've seen some bills that have some elements in it.
Sure, and I'm sure you're referencing Oklahoma Competes, the state chamber's initiative. Yes, I've had a lot of conversations with the state chamber, and so I filed legislation just yesterday on this. And really the beauty of it is we don't have to totally reinvent the wheel with what we've been doing on education policy. A lot of the components were already in the Strong Readers Act, which we have passed in recent years, working with the Senate and the governor. And some of that is getting back to the science of reading. As well as making sure that our colleges of education are teaching the science of reading and getting back to that. And so it's going to be something that we're really focused on. And I think if you look at us as a state where we want to go long term, if you want to turn around and move the needle, whether it's on economic development, healthcare, human services, public safety, you name it, if kids can't read, all of those other problems get worse. But if kids can read, all those other problems get a lot better, because the statistics show that if someone's behind in the 3rd grade, they're statistically likely to be behind in the 7th grade, statistically likely to be behind in high school, statistically likely to be behind as an adult. And truly, people will ask, well, what about math? Well, let's talk about that. Because if you can't read, how are you going to do math problems? Because you're not going to be able to read the problem as it's being presented to you. And so what we've seen, looking at Mississippi and other states who have done this, is if you invest in reading, you're going to see an increase in scores in other subjects as well, as people can understand and read. Something that I just learned last summer, which is common lingo for any of the educators that are watching this, particularly early elementary educators, is that kids learn to read so that they can read to learn. And so if you never truly learn to read, kids aren't able to read to learn and make that transition from 3rd grade to the rest of their education experience.
So let me ask you this, and I think you did, it's part of your bill. Are we ready to hold back 3rd graders again?
I believe that's a big part of the conversation. And so my hope, though, because a lot of focus and a lot of attention is going to be about the 3rd grade retention piece for students who don't pass the 3rd grade reading test. My hope is that we don't wait until the 3rd grade. And part of the legislation, what it talks about, is making sure if students are behind in the 1st grade, if they're behind in the 2nd grade, that we have those early interventions and get kids caught up before they take their 3rd grade reading test. Or perhaps if a kid needs to be retained, let's retain them in the 1st grade. Let's retain them in the 2nd grade and have those conversations with parents to make those interventions early. And I think that's something that's important. Now, the ultimate 3rd grade reading test is an important component, because you need to ultimately have that threshold and that standard set by the state that by the 3rd grade, kids need to be able to read.
Last session, the big surprise was the disaster at the Department of Mental Health. It sounds like progress has been made, but can we finally put this issue to bed once and for all? Get this tucked away. by the end of this current session?
So there's several questions there in one. I don't think we can put it to bed. There are certainly still challenges of the Department of Mental Health. I will say nothing but praise for Admiral Slavonic. I'm incredibly grateful, a great Oklahoman, a great American, being willing to step back in to this role. I know I was speaking to him a couple of weeks ago about how he volunteered to do this, and he corrected me. It wasn't exactly volunteering, but I appreciate his willingness to come and serve because that's what we needed. We needed someone to bring leadership and integrity into the department, and I think he's helped with that. Now, without a question, there are a lot of challenges long term, which we helped to expose some of those last year during the legislative session. And then a conversation about what does this look like long term, because obviously under the current structure, our governor appoints the director of the Department of Mental Health, and we will have a new governor this time next year. And so when you talk about the future, it's not only how do we bridge the gap for the remainder of Governor Stitt's tenure, but also how do we set up a system to be successful for the long term. And I think that's something that we have to work through over the coming years.
I imagine y'all don't like taking votes to remove directors. That was a very historic moment last May. Is that part of the reforming this, is making sure we never get to that point again?
Well, certainly that was not a vote that anybody wanted to take. It was only the second time in the history of the state of Oklahoma that the legislature has removed an appointed director of a state agency. I believe the state printer in the 19-teens was removed. And so that wasn't an action that we took lightly, but based on the actions and of the previous director and things that we had heard under testimony, we decided it was the right action to take.
Big Beautiful Bill has shifted a lot of what I just call social welfare programs over to SNAP and Medicare and things like that, Medicaid. And I'm wondering, how are you all handling this? It sounds expensive if you just pick up where the government left off. What are you looking at as far as, do you cut these programs? Do you put in work requirements? How do you move forward with your new requirements?
Yeah, so we're excited about the Big Beautiful Bill and the great impact for individuals and taxpayers, and making sure to preserve those tax cuts for the long haul. Of course, Oklahoma, we had income tax cuts last year as well, which are going to see benefit for Oklahoma taxpayers when they go file their taxes come here in a couple months. But when you look at the impact to healthcare, a lot of those impacts to our state budget, they're really still a couple of sessions away from impacting us directly in terms of the cuts on the hospital assessment tax rates that can be assessed and things along those lines. Now, the OHCA's budget request, though, is substantial, and that's something that we're going to be digging into. It was a substantial budget request back in October. We had some meetings with the new director over there that their budget request is likely going to increase even more before they make the presentation on the House floor here in the next week or two. And so that's something we're really going to be digging into. But a lot of that actually has to do with existing law preceding the Big Beautiful Bill.
Let me ask you real quick before we go, did it shock you, because we've heard during the government shutdown, lawmakers didn't realize how many people were on SNAP in this state. Does that number shock you? Do you think we need some reform there, especially now that y'all are going to have to pay for more of this?
Well, I think it certainly put more eyeballs on our welfare programs, and I filed legislation yesterday as well on the Secure Act, and I've filed 2 bills related to ensuring that illegal immigrants are not receiving welfare in the state of Oklahoma. And so I think that's important to make sure that we're not sending our tax dollars to those who are not American citizens. And so we're doing our part in the legislature to help ensure that that's the case.
Mr. Speaker, thank you so much for stopping by. We'll be watching.
Great to be here.
Thank you. Next week on In Depth, we will have Assistant House Minority Leader and Democratic State Representative Melissa Provenzano, who represents South and East Tulsa. We'll look at what the Democrats are focusing on and how their caucus feels about the debate over holding students back in the 3rd grade if they can't read at grade level. We will have that for you next week.